Thanks for jumping on here a few minutes early. Appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Coach and let him make an opening statement, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming or showing up or logging on. We wrapped up obviously fall camp with school starting yesterday. Had a little scrimmage. Today's the first day practicing since school started. It's about like what you would expect for the first practice with school. It's good to welcome everybody back to campus. Obviously, this is a unique time and unique circumstances. Good to have traffic on the roads, people around. So, fire away, men, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, Mike Nizelwick, let's start with you.
Yeah, just real quick first. Did you get any update on Raheem Blackshear?
No.
Okay. And then you said you had just the two scrimmages in fall camp. Anything you could share in terms of position groups or players that stood out, and what you your main takeaways of both of those in the last 2 weeks?
Well, it's a unique situation, obviously. First of all, we've got guys joining the team at different stages. It used to be if you brought a guy in late, you had to get him into school and then put him in the mix. Now we've got a couple guys at different stages because of COVID coming into our program. So, Chenga is a guy that has shown flashes, but is, just now working his way into practice. Devin obviously hasn't been out there yet. I don't know, you got the usual suspects of guys that have played a lot that are still playing well. You've got, some guys that have made improvements that are continuing to get better. I think, finding a way to get through the season, being flexible. We've moved guys. Some guys have worked in the secondary at different spots and so on and so forth. But I don't know if I've got any one person that I want to just jump up and down and single out over the first two scrimmages.
Has the running back competition, have you narrowed things down a little bit? You still got, 9 guys there? Who's kind of working with the ones, and where do you kind of see that right now?
Well, obviously, if you take Raheem out of it, trying to figure out his status, and you start to think about, Jalen, Keyshawn, and Herbert have been working in there. Marco's gotten some, but it's basically the older guys, the guys that have played. The younger guys are still, the true freshmen we brought in are doing a good job. I'm pleased with them, but they're not quite as far along as those guys have got some reps.
Hill.
Justin, you've known all along that this was going to be a unique and fluid season if it indeed happens. Was last night's news that your opponent in less than 3 weeks had to pause preseason workouts just another reminder of how unique these times are?
Yeah, I feel like it, it's like you walk off the practice field and you're just waiting for the new news that's happened. It's not a daily thing. It's almost an hourly update. And I think that's going to be the normal. It's just, there's so many, I don't want to, not barriers, but there's so many checks and balances and things that everybody's got to try to do that, for the right reasons, obviously, that, news and information can change really quickly. And who knows? Opponents can change and schedules can change. It's just, you're going to have to go with the flow a little bit. You have to control what you can control, worry about the things that you're in control of, and do your best to handle the unknown one step at a time. I mean, this is literally, I'm a big planner, but we're literally one day trying to make it through one day at a time.
And then kind of a non-football question. I don't know how much of a consumer of live sports you are on television. As the past month, as sports has started to come back on television, has that lent any shred of normalcy to your life? I mean, have you watched any of the NBA playoffs or anything like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm from UFC to golf to basketball. I even watched a soccer game the other day. Not that I don't like soccer. I'm not a large soccer consumer, but it was refreshing to have it back. I felt like at first, like the first couple of events I watched with no fans, it was odd. And now it's kind of gotten to where you kind of, it's kind of normal now. I know fans are anxious to get back into the venues. Obviously, we've got to do it the right way, but it's been nice to see some people doing something out there on television, whether it's playing golf or the NBA playoffs.
Andy Bitter.
Yeah, Justin, the NCAA last week basically made this a free year for players. I'm curious, how does that change your approach with freshmen, perhaps, that you'd have to consider redshirting, and does that change your thought process with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody, all hands on deck, basically. I'm not really positive how it's going to be managed after the semester, with midterm guys and graduates and guys that stay or don't stay, and the long-term ramifications of scholarships for high school players, because there's going to be more, everybody's getting it, not just your seniors. So yeah, it's pretty much like you said, it's a free year. You get to go play. So how it's going to look in the short term, it's pretty easy. In the long term, it'll be interesting to see how we handle it.
I think for some of those freshmen, you still have to make a decision whether they're ready to contribute. Are there guys in this freshman class that in those first couple of weeks you see and you go, yeah, they're ready to contribute on some level?
Well, certainly in the first level is usually the kicking game. There's just not as, there's just not as much schematics involved in that. But, there's, there's a bunch of guys that I think are going to have to contribute in some way. Whether that's covering a kick or playing on offense or defense. Keontae Jenkins is one on the defensive side. That's a young player that has shown a lot of promise and ability to pick up things pretty quickly. We'll see as we continue to go through it. Wooten has been gotten a bunch of good work on the defensive side of the ball. He's a little bit more developed guy. So those running backs are physically developed and will need to be ready to do something early.
Norm Wood.
Hey Justin, you got a new defensive back, obviously, with Devin Taylor in the house. Is he in the fold yet? Is he practicing with you? He's not.
He's in school. He's good to go. But as you can imagine, Norm, with COVID, we can't just bring an outside guy in and just jump him in. Like, there's all sorts of levels as you essentially assimilate into the group, right? So from initial COVID tests to then you can work in small groups, and then that, a certain period of time passes, then larger groups. So no, he's not been out there yet.
Does that, considering you have some, I don't know if you have, I wouldn't call it depth concerns, but there are some depth, you would like to have some extra guys back there. Does that concern you about the level of preparedness he might be able to get before the start of the season and help you out?
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, but it's part of what everybody's dealing with. So we'll get him up to speed as quick as we can. He's played a lot of football. I feel he's obviously an older player. It's different if you're a freshman, but yeah, we'll have to do a great job as he goes through those stages, still getting him up to speed with what's going on.
Given the answer, you said you want to get some clarification on some of the things regarding the eligibility last week, and I know Andy asked you a little bit about it, but do you think that might stem the tide of any guys that might have considered opting out before that, and now you might not have as many guys opting out if they were considering it, or have you had any other guys come forward since then?
No, we haven't had any more come forward. Well, I guess I would say this. Those that opt out for COVID reasons, that should not have any effect on. You would think that with the way the rule has been passed, it should eliminate or greatly reduce those that opt out for eligibility concerns.
Thanks.
Mike Barber.
Yeah, Coach, we've talked so much, and I know it's a maddening topic, but how do you feel about the level of communication and information you have as a head coach when it comes to these NCAA waivers, going back to Brock, looking at Raheem, Braxton? Do you feel like you have a fair handle on what's going on here?
No. I don't know, it is, it seems from the outside to be inconsistent, I guess I would say. It's obviously it's not handled by the coaches, which is probably a good thing. I mean, it's handled by compliance, but I think we all just want clarity on what rules we're playing by. I think that's probably the biggest issue. I'm not saying it's intentional. It just feels like we're never really sure exactly how it all gets worked out.
You mentioned you've been through a couple scrimmages now. This is unrelated. Can you tell me how have you split up the work from the quarterbacks, and what have you seen from those guys?
I've been pleased with all of them. You start with the young in Knox. I think he's made great improvement. He's behind the older players, but it's been nice. His physically he's gotten much stronger and is much more confident in what's going on. The three older guys in Braxton, Quincy, and Hendon, have all made improvements. We're splitting those things equally. We'll start to narrow that stuff down. They all bring something to the table. You can see very clearly how you could build whatever you're trying to do offensively around that person, different strengths and weaknesses. But I think they've all made good strides towards improvement, and I'm excited about what they've put on film so far.
Thank you.
WSLS.
Hey, Coach, you seem particularly chipper today, a little more smiley and happy. Is it just kind of the return to normalcy with students back on campus, or, being done with camp, or the fact that, you can see a game, hopefully, in the forefront?
And I appreciate you saying that. I feel really chipper. I think I saw several eye rolls from your colleagues. Mostly Norm. But, yeah, I mean, it's nice to have people around. I know we're dealing with all this stuff and everything's been so negative, and we don't know what the future is going to hold, and we're trying to just handle today. But, it's been nice to see people on campus, and, this is supposed to be the most optimistic and fun time of the year. And I know fall camp can be a little bit of a grind, but the weather's usually really nice. There's the thought of a potential football season, whatever that may look like. There's freshmen going to college for the first time. There's just a lot that comes with this time of year. And while this is certainly not how it usually is, it's it certainly gives you some glimmer of hope and some excitement for the semester.
Thanks.
Chris Coleman.
Yeah, Coach, now that you've had a couple of weeks to look at guys like Justice Reed and Amari Barno, what are your overall thoughts on your defensive end spot right now?
Well, Amari can really run. He continues to get better. You know, it is a change for him. Like he's working his way into to learning the position. Justice obviously has played it a long time. He's a big, strong player. You know, has provided some maturity on the team. He's a grown-up, and I think both of them have a chance to be productive. Amari's got to focus on continuing to improve, and you know, Justice has got to continue to understand the scheme and what we're teaching, because that is a little bit different. But I'm optimistic about both of them.
Travis Wells.
Coach, I know a couple days ago you had a chance to give John Parker Romo a scholarship, and I know those moments are always kind of cool. Could you just describe that and what went into it and why you wanted to reward him in that way?
Well, first of all, he's earned it. He's been a great teammate. He's fit right in with our program. Obviously, he has been productive on the field as well. You think about not just handling kickoffs, but what I think about is the Notre Dame game last year. You know, on Thursday, Oscar, whatever he did, pulls his groin or whatever, and John Romo fills in there immediately, just jumps in there and doesn't bat an eye. It was really pretty awesome job by him. But, you know, when we have them and people have earned them, we want to reward them. And I think it speaks to the other guys that have walked on our program. We have a long history of putting those guys on scholarship. You know, I personally just brought Romo in and just sat him down and told him, you know, basically what I'm telling you, you've earned this. You can't change because of this, but, you know, I want you to know that I'm not giving you a gift. I'm giving you something you've earned, and, you know, congratulations. And he was excited. And I told him, you can share this with everybody or nobody. It's up to you how you want to handle this. But, you know, I think that's, you know, in my perspective, that's a personal thing for him, and he chose to share it, which is awesome. And just really proud of him and glad he's here.
Jermaine Farrell.
Morning, Coach. How you doing today, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Doing good, sir. Just a couple of questions. First of all, how have you and your family been handling, you know, the COVID situation as far as, you know, the sheltering and all that? And number two, this is a big one for me, binge watching. Are there any binge shows have you been binging to watch during this COVID period?
I've seen a few. My kids are doing great. Thank you for asking. I think they are anxious to get to school, you know, and be around their friends. But for us, it's been mostly outside. You know, we've done a little bit more fishing. Obviously not now during fall camp, but before this, we spent a little bit more time outside, which was really nice, to be honest with you. Did some fishing and, you know, played golf and basically got some good quality time together. That's been one of the benefits of this whole situation is we have spent more time together. But they, you know, it was healthy for them. They need to get back to school and get around people their own age. As far as binge watching, I think this isn't really binge watching, but I think the staff is pretty dialed into Yellowstone with the season finale the other day. That seems to be a hot topic. Rip seems to be – there seems to be several coaches we have here with man crushes on Rip. I think he's a stud. But I don't know. It's kind of been so long, you know. Like I feel like I've watched quite a bit of stuff that I would have never seen before. But right now, yeah, with the season finale, Yellowstone's the big one on everybody's mind.
What about Last Chance U? Have you seen that?
You know, the coaches watched that, and I didn't. And you know, I know they're in a different place, but the last couple of years, the place they were at, like I didn't want to watch that, quite honestly. But our coaches, almost all of them, watch it and talk about it all the time.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Andrea Adelson.
Justin, another question about the quarterbacks. With Hendon and his development and what we saw out of him last year, how did the quarantine and kind of not being around everybody in the program, how has that affected him in terms of where you thought he could be at this point? And also the relationship in developing some of the receivers as well, how has that been impacted?
Well, I don't think I'd be truthful if I say we didn't skip a beat. You know, we missed all of spring practice. We had a shortened summer. Our conditioning level is not the same as it usually is rolling into camp. Some of our chemistry hasn't been the same. So it certainly had effect. There's a reason we do all those things. So it certainly has had an effect. I think they've done a good job. They being the receivers and Hendon and the quarterbacks, you know, they didn't start back at zero. You know, they found ways to get good work in when they were allowed to. And so it hasn't been as huge a deal, but certainly losing 15 practices and 15 opportunities to improve and some of the things we do in the summertime, we're not as far along as we usually are.
Paul Van Wagner.
Good morning, Justin. I hope you're doing well. Quick question for you about just kind of the difference between what goes on during fall camp and then what happens, how you transition into the actual practices that you're going through now. What are kind of the biggest differences between the two?
Well, it's kind of a weird deal because we're 3 weeks into school before we play now. So usually it's 2 weeks and sometimes it's only one. So we're kind of still in fall camp practices. So we haven't turned our attention towards our mock weekend. That's 2 weeks before we play. We haven't turned our attention towards our first opponent. We're still working on us throughout this week. Next week would be like our normal first week of school practice schedule. The biggest thing is we're restricted when school starts with the amount of time we can spend with the players, whereas during fall camp, we're not as restricted. So, you know, we have more walkthrough time, more meeting time during fall camp. The practices, length and duration are basically the same right now. Obviously, we taper down as we approach our first game, but just the volume of time, like we have them for 4 hours today and that's it. Whereas during fall camp, we have a walkthrough and meetings and they get a lift in and they come back and practice in the afternoon. And then we have meetings in the evening time. It's a full day of football during fall camp.
We'll try to get to a few more here. David Hale.
Hey, Justin. I'm curious. I know you had talked a little earlier in camp about the research that you guys did based off of what Miami did on contact throughout practices and how much time people would spend within their individual circles. I'm curious how you have managed that or adjusted based on that information as you've gone through practices in camp, and how concerned are you about the potential effect of contact tracing if there was to be a positive test result, whether it's on your own team or an opponent as the season goes along?
Well, certainly I'll go backwards there, David. Contact tracing, you know, obviously has the potential to remove several players for an extended period of time from your team. So it is something that we've spent hours upon hours talking about, trying to find a way to mitigate those things through what we can control, from meeting spaces to how we sit to masks. You can imagine the litany of those things. When we're on the field, I was shocked by the numbers, quite honestly, of how small of time that they were in the contact zone, or however you want to define that. I thought the numbers were going to be much higher. So, you know, the part that we can control is when they're not in. So when they're on the sidelines, when we're waiting for a drill to start, those types of things, making sure we're spread out. The other thing you can control is time spent at the line of scrimmage, with those two guys, or the offense and defensive line standing there while a play is not going on, trying to mitigate that time the best that you can. So, but there are uncontrollable parts of that too. If you're covering a wide receiver, you have to be close to him, or you need to be, right? If you're blocking somebody, obviously you're going to be close. So there are parts that you can't control, but we try to control the controllables when it comes to all that stuff when we're on the field.
Wes McElroy.
Coach, you mentioned you had a couple scrimmages. I know you worked through stuff on the field, but what about stuff? Have you worked about the sidelines with spacing when you guys are on the sideline, and more so your coach's communication with the players? Have you walked through that part of the game day aspect?
Yes. They're giving us more room on the sidelines this year, extending the team box area so we can spread out. But, that's been a huge point of emphasis for us. I mean, it's really as simple as, extending your arms. It still happens though. I mean, you're still having conversations. You're still talking about what's going on from player to player. Coaches are all in masks or shields on the field to help that. So, and then they've made some alterations to the players' shields, which I feel good about. At first it was a pretty rough endeavor for those kids, but they've made some alterations to them that I think the kids are getting more receptive to those to help that out as well.
Thanks.
David Teal.
Justin, we've seen some schools around the country, including in the league, have to pause in-person classes and return to virtual learning, but yet they are continuing to prepare for football. Given how much time and effort that has gone into preparing for this season, would you personally be comfortable continuing to play football if Virginia Tech did not have in-person classes?
Well, it's an interesting situation. Like, does that mean that everybody goes home, or are the kids still on campus? Like, to me, the actual in-person class part of it is just one piece of that puzzle. If everybody's still here and still having parties and doing things that college kids do, to me, that's, the in-person class is only one little part of that. But, if we get to that point, then we'll deal with it. However our administration and our leaders see fit. That's an institutional decision that will probably not be made by me, and will be left in the hands of the experts.
Couple more. Hank Kurz.
Hey, Justin. Alabama said either today or yesterday, I think, that they've had 560 cases since they went back to school. How, obviously you guys have talked with the players a lot about this, but how much of a concern is it in mixing them up with a student body that may not be as attentive to social distancing and things like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there certainly is the conversation that okay. So there's obviously, our kids have something else. They can't test positive, right? Like, if they do, they're removed from football. And, there's another population of students out there that, that may not have as much to, they don't have as much to lose in terms of those things, right? Like, we understand that part of it. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just the way it is. And is it easier to handle if there's nobody here? Certainly. I mean, that's why the NBA is doing what the NBA is doing. Is they're reducing the contact with other people, and we just have to realize that if we want a chance to stick with this, that we can't live our lives the way that other people may choose to live their lives. And that's a decision we all have to make. And it's easier for me. So I tell our guys, it's a lot easier for me than it is for you. When I get finished with work, I go home. I see the same 4 people every day. Right? I come into work and I go home and I go see my wife and kids. But when I was 19, that's not what I did. When I was 20, that's not what I did. But we have to understand that. And what we do affects everybody else in our room, you know, because of what we're dealing with. And is it an easier problem to try to solve, or is it an easier goal to achieve if there's less people around? Certainly, but that's not where we're at right now. We have to do our part and control what we can control.
And obviously, you guys have talked about the focus on looking ahead to the season that seems to be, you know, impending. How much time, if any, do you spend thinking about the fact that at any point in this, the plug could be pulled and, you know, you guys could be in the spring?
Oh, I wouldn't be truthful if I told you I'd never thought about that. You know, I mean, it's human nature. You think about those things, but you've just got to, you know, you got to do your best to continue to put one foot in front of the other. So focus on what you know and what you can control and what the situation is now. If there's one thing we've learned is that this is fluid, right? In the last, whatever it is, 6 months, we've learned that the situation is fluid, and we're going to have to be able to adapt based on the information we have at the time. And what we have right now is what we've got to operate under.
Thank you.
One more, Mike Nizelik.
Yeah, are you guys with a couple players with Shamari Connor? Are you using that whip position like you did with Bud, and where do you see him kind of having had taken a step forward? He was obviously a playmaker for you guys last year.
So just rephrase that, Mike. What do you?
Sure.
How's he doing? Or
Shamari Connor, are you using the whip position similarly as you did under Bud, and then how is he doing, and how's he taking a step forward?
Yeah, I mean, he's been great. He's evolved into a leader for us. He's a great worker. He's a physical football player that continues to improve. I think Jay Ham is probably doing some things that help him play to his strengths and maybe try to avoid some things that he needs to continue to work on. But so yeah, there's similarities into the way we're playing that position, and then there's a few things that'll be a little bit different. But he's been really productive, and I anticipate he'll continue to do that.
And then on special teams, Tavion's still the guy with punt returns, and what are you guys doing with the kick return spot?
Yes, on Tavion. We do have some other guys that are working back there that I think have made improvement that can do those things. Khalil's worked back there. Raheem's worked back there. Trey's worked back there. Changa's worked back there. A couple other guys, but some guys that have looked comfortable back there. With the kick returner, Keyshawn, if we played tomorrow, would go out there. You know, obviously Raheem has been working back there some too. We'll see how all that turns out. Khalil's worked back there. So, but right now, if we played tomorrow, we'd put Keyshawn out there, and Jalen would be the other returner on the other side.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We tried to get to as many as we could, so we'll keep you posted once we have more information. So thank you, everybody.